As a listener of this podcast, you may have heard me speak often about meditation and how it has played a key role in widening my perspectives and realizing that I have the agency of changing my perspectives about life and the various elements in life. And one area of my life that all this inner work has really helped me see in a new light is Judaism. Growing up, it was perceived as a religion so intellectual and so cerebral without emotion. Even early on in my meditative practice, I was shocked that this stuff was not taught in Judaism. However, as I constantly and continuously grow and dive into learning about the richness of Judaism, I see that there's such a deep and wide knowledge in pretty much every subject, from meditation to physics to science and medicine and beyond, of both spiritual worlds and spiritual understanding and to our earthly world. And it's beginning to be revealed. Nevertheless, much of what is taught can be seen as cerebral and like a to-do list that you just check off and do this and that. So it excites me to connect with and now share with you Rabbi Daniel Bortz, the Millennial Rabbi, who's on a mission to make Judaism experiential, meaning viewing Judaism as a relationship, not a religion, but with God, that we can understand intellectually and emotionally. As you hear us talk about, when you really know something, it's not just intellectual knowledge, but it has to make it into your body. And that's what's so powerful about experiences, especially new experiences, because experience enriches the circuitry in your brain. And to get the behavior to match your intentions, to get the mind and the body working together, a new experience has to occur. And it enriches the circuits in the brain. And once that occurs, the brain releases a certain chemical, which is a feeling, and you begin to embody a philosophy that you've been learning. At the end of the interview, we spoke about his virtual retreat called the Divine You Retreat, which already took place, but you may be able to purchase the recordings if you reach out to him on Instagram. It was a phenomenal all-day virtual event and amazing speakers, some of which were previous guests on this podcast. And you can follow more of Rabbi's work, especially after hearing a little bit about his story on this episode. You can go check out his website, Rabbi Bortz, RABBIBORTZ.com, or follow him on social media at Millennial Rabbi. If you haven't yet, please leave a review about the show and today's guest on Apple Podcasts. I've been seeing some really genuine and nice reviews as of recent. And head over to SolomonEzra.com or follow me on Instagram at King_Solomon8, Facebook Solomon Ezra Berezin to learn more. Also subscribe to my YouTube channel, Solomon Berezin, to get updates on new videos and podcasts. And finally, if you're interested in starting my one-on-one coaching programs, head over to the coaching services pages on my website and be sure to reach out. Now onto the show with the Millennial Rabbi. Well, we started with some juicy stuff, but I'd love to
Don't you worry, we're
rolling
gonna
and hear a little bit about yourself, your background. I think you have a very cool background that led into all the work that you're doing now with you. I saw, you used to compete in jiu-jitsu tournaments. You would go and do, you would have like a Shabbat tent at Coachella. And one of the things that I think connects me with following all your stuff is, of course, the promotion and the practice of meditation, and how it's very important in creating I want to say pure and like maybe the original intention of how Judaism was taught. So with all that, please welcome Daniel. It's a pleasure to have you on.
It's a pleasure to be here, Solomon. Thank you for having me. I was born in South Africa and grew up in San Diego, California. And my parents started to get a little more into Judaism slowly as I was growing up. So I started to get, some of the knowledge. They sent me to a Jewish school. So I kind of had that basis, but they were very much of the world. I would say they moved towards modern orthodoxy and balance of the secular world and the spiritual world. And as many of us do post bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, I started to want to go into my own self-actualization. And I wanted to go to public school, and I wanted to hang out with other friends and experiment and see what the world had to offer. And that led me down various paths that were strong learning experiences and put me kind of at a point where I had to figure out what I wanted and where truth was. I was always like a seeker of truth, like where was my place in the world as we start to grow in our teenage years and after that. And I started to really connect to my Jewish roots and started learning why we believe what we believe. And I also started to have some spiritual experiences, which in the past I wouldn't really talk about because it was considered, even in Jerusalem and yeshiva, people were a little bit weirded out if you said you had an otherworldly experience. It's a little bit out there, but today I feel like the way our culture has progressed with spirituality and meditation, it's not so weird to say anymore. But that's what happened to me. Beyond all the intellectual rigor and everything else, I would say the main reason why I connected back to religion and God was spiritual experiences that I believe God gifted me and that came out of the blue. And that was like a spark that led me down the path of discovery that later connected to Torah and Judaism and Orthodoxy and Jerusalem and all of that. I wanted to find that again. I wanted to see, where is this spark going? Why is it? What is this feeling? What is the soul that I have? And as I progressed down that path, I went very much into it, meaning I kind of dressed the part. I had the suit and the black hat. I was in yeshiva learning all day long, literally. Maybe breaks for the bathroom. And even then it was hard to turn the mind off from Torah learning. Which you're not supposed to think about it when you're in the bathroom. It's not a holy place. So that was my biggest challenge of the day. And eat, breathe, sleep, spiritual growth. And immersion, I believe, is important for some parts of your life to really go in deep, as you and I were talking about with seminars and retreats, the ability to immerse. And I'll just say that the stage that I found after that immersion was then I found kind of a third place where I was able to look to harmonize the life I lived up until becoming more religious, and then the truth that I felt I had found, and to try to harmonize them together and realize that my whole life, it wasn't like I had nothing true before and now I only had truth, but all the parts of who I am and what I'm into and what I'm passionate about, what I find interest in, all can find a place within my service of God and in making this world a dwelling place for God. And that's what kind of led me down to all the things you were mentioning about, Coachella and jujitsu. I could take the things I enjoyed and elevate it to a godly experience.
Wow, that's so cool. That's so cool. How did you feel like, or how did those spiritual experiences guide you to more of a religious observance? Because it also seems like there are stories we hear of other well-known people. There's even well-known meditation teachers who are Jewish, but they aren't practicing or aren't observant. But they're also still very living, at least in my current understanding, a Torah life and how they elevate things around them. How did you feel like it was guiding you towards observant lifestyle? Into like you were studying like all day, as you said.
Yeah, so it's a great question. It could have not. I think on a practical level, I had learned in Jewish schools for a lot of my life. My family was Shabbat, kosher. I had that context. I had learned a lot about Judaism, so it was natural for me to look within my own faith and to get some guidance as to what's the proper path. It's not enough for me to just feel this. What is this connected to? What's the plan? What's the purpose of why we're here? Because you can be spiritual all day long. One thing I love to think about and talk about is the difference between spirituality and holiness. I think
holiness or God, like holiness and godliness.
I guess you could connect holiness with godliness. Yeah, maybe that is the definition of what changes it from spiritual to holy, is the godly aspect, is the fact that there's an objective truth that I am attaching this connection to, that I could bliss out all day long on a mountaintop and meditate, and there's nothing wrong with that per se. But the goal I think Judaism espouses that I really resonate with is, how do I take that feeling and permeate the physical with it? How do I live my life practically aligned with that feeling? That's not enough to, because you could feel spiritual one moment, and then you walk, like this happens to me all the time. You pray with fervor, and then you take off your tefillin, you go in your car, someone cuts you off and you get angry at them, you yell at them. It's like, dude, what just happened there? So the goal of holiness, like permeate your waking state, your non-meditative state. That's the place that you have to bring that into, and that's practical. That's a
Yeah.
lot of what Jewish life is.
Did you find you mentioned you can go to like a mountain and bliss out and just do that the whole day. How is it any different than, there are some people in the Jewish nation that just sit in a room and study all day?
Mm. There are a select few that I think it is perhaps their service. They're attuned to that, and we need some leaders and experts that we can turn to that do that. Part of me wants to do that. There's a part of me that would love to go to Tzfat and just learn Kabbalah and learn Torah and spend time in prayer, meditation.
Yeah.
But I believe ultimately for most of us, the goal isn't to separate ourselves from the world. It's to bring, God has enough angels, plenty of angels. He even has us as souls before we're born, meaning before we came down, we were souls that had no negative impulses. We were singing God's praise with angels. So why come down at all? The point is during the short span of life that we have to permeate our physical surroundings and our practical day-to-day life with God. That's the unique thing we can contribute. Now, to do that, you have to spend some time, prayer every day, meditation every day, learning every day to keep yourself pumped up with that, aligned with that truth. But that's not to remain there, I don't think.
Yeah, it's like that's the whole like with my podcast, like how do we live in that state of flow where you're also kind of in both worlds at the same time, kind of like a knife's edge, the sharp part is it's a fine line, but it's still part of both sides. So it's really cool in your own, just watching and tuning in on your social media and your YouTube and listening to you now, how you kind of were fully in, and it's like you were building, let's say like if it's like a right arm and a left arm, you were like building the spiritual side, and because you were like catching up per se, maybe what you didn't have growing up, or I don't want to say didn't have, but I think you're with me. And then you were like, okay, now it's time to, as we're taught, it's making this place a dwelling place for God, which is elevating all the round, so all the world. So now it's really cool that you're really kind of merging both. You have a foot in both worlds.
Yeah, the Baal Shem Tov taught that bechol derechecha te'eu, in all your ways know God. So it's not like a compromise to take, let's say, the world outside of religion and spirituality and then take the other and compromise them. Is that if it's true that there's nothing outside of God's light, then everything has the potential to, you can find a way of elevating it. Now, there are some things you elevate it through rejecting it, through not getting involved in that thing, like non-kosher food, and there's different things that we don't try to elevate. But most things from nature to sports to music, everything has, it's not compromising, it's revealing the deeper truth within everything. And I like when you said knife's edge and back and forth, because one of the fundamental ideas in Jewish mysticism is ratzo v'shuv, which means running and returning, that the angels that Ezekiel saw in his vision were running to God in love and returning in awe, respect, reverence. And we do that, right? We go on the mountaintops, we go up, we pray, our souls might feel like they want to leave their body. But then when we finish, we stop, we sit down with our children or with our breakfast or with whatever it is, and we ground that experience into our worlds. That's the goal, the back and forth, the candle that shoots up off the wick, but then settles back down. And that's what creates light in the room.
That's it's so cool. And you bring it up because that's what the ebb and flow is. And I was talking to Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson yesterday, and we were bringing that up as well, because in the Tanya lessons, the chapter 50, it talks exactly about that the Levites in the times of the Messianic times will be elevated to the level of a Kohen, and they'll sing this songs of Ratzo Vashuv. I thought it was really, really cool.
Yeah.
Wow. So how have all these experience in your own journey and balance in cultivating this balance of all of that led into, you competed in sports, so you also have that physical passion and element with health. And then also you have a book, Beneath the Surface, and you have a soul living immersive course. How did all of this kind of translate into how you're expressing all this into helping other people, whether it was through the sports, through the book, through the course,
Mm.
similar work that I myself am bringing into and sharing.
Yeah, I think it all comes back to the desire to, when you connect with something that's good for you, that you enjoy, that you believe is true, is sharing that with other people.
Mhm.
I always had a desire to do that my whole life. Like if there was something I believed was true and I believed was beneficial, I wanted others to experience. I didn't want it to just be me, which is part of my nature, even before I was religious. And um, all those three things you mentioned are connected to that. When it comes to the book, Beneath the Surface, every week in yeshiva, I was learning so many mind blowing things, I couldn't contain them all. So what I would do is I would choose one or maybe one. And I guess my little skill I had in the ADD generation was to take a 4 hour for bringing a 4 hour talk and give it over in 4 paragraphs. So I would get an email list of friends and family, and I would just send every week a short kind of, what is the kernel of the truth of what was given? What is the like main point? Instead of getting bogged down in too many details, just what's the main message? What's the main story, the main lesson? And over the years, I collected them, collected them, collected them. I had a blog, and I decided to put them together in a book. So that's how Beneath the Surface was formed. The idea of looking at life and looking at other people beyond the superficial layer that it shows us, finding the soul within it. And that theme of finding the soul behind everything and within everyone is what led also to my course, Soul Living,
Mhm.
which was very much focused and is very much focused on helping people get in touch with their souls and within with the spiritual reality. And there's a lot to say on that, but that's the coaching course I do. And jujitsu was a little bit connected to that as well, because I was teaching a boy bar mitzvah in San Diego, and his father was and him were really into jujitsu, and he's like, "You got to try this." And I boxed a bit in high school. I was always in sports my whole life, like
Yeah.
every sport. My curse is that, some people, let's say, love one sport or two, and that takes up a lot of time. If you're a baseball fan, a football fan, it's a lot of time. Fantasy football, all that. I happen to be passionate about six sports, literally six, not like sort of, but like knowing everything about it, knowing
Wow.
tennis, MMA, English soccer, football, basketball, to name a few. So I'm one of four boys. My dad's South African. We were very sports focused. I played all the sports competitively pretty much. And when this came around, I was like, I haven't really, when you get older, you don't really do competitive sports anymore. You try to go to the gym, you try to maybe shoot the basketball, bike or whatever. So I got into jujitsu. It was horrible at first. You get destroyed every day. But I started like anything else in life.
Mhm.
After day after day, you do something. One day you wake up and you're like, oh, I actually sort of know how to do this. It just happens like out
Yeah.
of the blue. And that's with everything. Torah learning, a relationship with a loved one. All of a sudden you're like, wow, we've built something here. Um, and part of it, the reason I connected it back to the other two things is that, to be fair, like I definitely enjoy the idea that people look at a rabbi and they're like, oh, how could you do this as a rabbi? Like, I like that. Whether it's Coachella, whether it's jujitsu, I like people to be like, wow, there's no limitation to someone
Mhm.
being religious or spiritual and involving themselves in this. So that was kind of a fun aspect of getting into jujitsu too, which was to inspire people. I meet a lot of new people through it. People that I wouldn't meet otherwise that are also into it. It's like a secret society. And then of course I just enjoyed it. I enjoyed the challenge, taking on a new challenge, and competition was definitely a scary challenge that I
Yeah.
put under another life experience. I'm glad hard to do, but glad I did, kind of thing. So
Wow.
yeah, we got to
I felt like
influence the world positively. That's why. Yeah.
I felt like my cousins are in do jujitsu, and I joined one time, and it was like mental chess that includes
Mm.
all your physical movements. So I was at that age, I was relying so much on strength that it was just like easy to flip me over or whatever.
That's I think of it as a Jewish sport. We're not always known as the biggest, strongest people on earth, but it's the gentle art where the smaller one can beat the bigger one. Like, did David beat Goliath?
Yeah,
That's kind of jujitsu. That's
yeah.
so and it has the word Jew in it. So
I'll have to get into it. You were saying about your book Beneath the Surface. It was kind of a what's the word? A collection of all your different blog posts from the yeshiva and all these
yes.
the learnings from the discourses that you were studying during the time. Um, what was so unique about them, and how did you like act um, take that information and also like apply it? Because I've also listened to many discourses that it's like it really like it's like wow, how did they make that connection? It's like
Mm,
it's like it leaves you with some level of a highness. It's like
yeah.
wow, I never thought about, like, for example, I was reading during Passover the discourse recurring Exodus, and it's like, and I was writing a blog post about it as well and notes on the book. It's like this whole, you grow up in learning about, the splitting of the sea, but it never like occurred to me to ask, out of all the miracles God could have done, why split the sea? And it goes into this whole discourse explaining exactly what the splitting of the sea is. And like we were talking about earlier in our conversation, the difference between, just going on a mountaintop and meditating all day, or even just studying all day, being able to merge that holiness, which is compared analogous to water and living in the water, to walking on dry land, which is living on the world, in the world where you feel separate. It's a feeling of separate identity. But the Jews walking in the sea, in the midst of the sea on dry land, it's like, wow, you're merging both of them, which is
Mm.
what we've been talking about. And it's fascinating. So with all that, how did you, whether it was a blog post you're writing or even in your own life, take all that information and what tools did you use to then personalize it?
Yeah. I think what yeshiva does for you, or Torah learning does for you, or if you're a spiritual seeker, is penetrating analysis, meaning
Hmm.
you don't just hear an idea or think about something and stop at the outside. You continually go and dissect it and go further and further until it sits with you. It has to connect. I guess the best way to explain it is you've heard of the Chabad movement. Rabbi, all the people, all the great rabbis you're interviewing, a lot of them are Chabad. Chabad really comes from
It's
the
true.
three.
I need to get a more diverse crowd.
Words. No, you're doing
I
good.
need to get everybody, all the Jews.
Chabad rocks, but yeah, all of them rock. The Alter Rebbe called the movement Chabad because the first three sfirot, the first three divine emanations, we'll put Ketzer out for a second, is Chochma Bina Dat. In English, wisdom, comprehension, and knowledge. Now, I feel like often we focus on wisdom and understanding, wisdom and comprehension, which is the idea of like having a novel insight or really breaking an idea down into details. That's great. But the third part is often missed. And the third part is dot. Dot is knowledge. But just to show you where English falls short, knowledge. What do I mean, knowledge? That word dot is used when Adam and Eve are intimate and have a child. To Adam knew Eve.
Yeah.
And new means that it's a way of connecting to an idea in almost an intimate way, in a way that resonates with you and that makes you, that's the wow moment. That's the feeling of like, oh, that sits so well, that settles. I
Yeah.
connect with this idea. And those are the ones I like sharing the most. There's certain stories or analogies. Every one in my book that I have, like the ones I like to share on my podcast, whatever it is, are the ones that connect my mind and my heart.
Yeah.
And that's what dot does. That connecting to an idea that it resonates so much, it births an emotion.
Mm-hmm.
That's the place I like to play in everything that I do, in the events that I create, in the Torah stories that I like to share, because that's where the magic is. And I believe there are ways to teach in that way, like oftentimes, like I said, like stories, parables, that can take you into a world and you get the same idea you would have gotten if somebody told you straight up, this is this. Okay, I
Yeah.
get it. But through a story or through something I can relate to in my daily life, you're like, oh, whoa, like I see that idea in a new light. And then you can like integrate it into your daily life. And there's so many different
Yeah.
stories that
Yeah,
are,
you're right about the story, in that I was listening to a discourse on a few parshas ago on Acharei Mot,
yeah.
and It was when King David, it was a story of when King David sent Bathsheba's wife or husband to the army, and he ended up getting killed so he could marry her. Obviously, they ended up giving birth to Solomon, but one of the prophets came to him and didn't just say, why did you do this, and just tell him about that, or you did this thing. He told it in a story using like a sheep as an analogy and all that things,
Mm,
and it helped David see, and it's like a reflection. Oh, I am that man. I did that thing.
wow.
So you're right that with the stories we're able to see, as the Zohar says, as above, below, or as it's reflected in water, so it is the truth. So it's really cool. Do you also use, like, when you're talking about das, which is like when I like to kind of use the more scientific language to help, like when the thoughts and the feelings, like you said, the mind and the heart really connect, and you really just have that permeating from inside experience. One tool, and we both share this tool with meditation. Do you use that also as a way to experience and uh, create that level of dot or that connection? Because sometimes when I have like maybe a lot of thoughts, when you're thinking about something, the meditation helps kind of go above the thoughts and allow them to just make the connection on your own, till you get to a place of beyond the thought, and then it just like, it's almost like something just kind of downloads or sinks in. It's like, I got it.
That's so well put, because I mentioned that Keter, which is the middle path
Mm,
beyond Chachma Bina, is in line with Dot. It's almost interchangeable with Dot. And I believe when you meditate, you're tapping into that transcendent part of self that's beyond your intellect, which is Keter, which is the highest sphera. And you feel that and integrate that when you move from Keter to Dot. Dot is that, I'll give you like one meditation I love to do when I lead meditations is the analogy, the example of the Baal Shem Tov. He says, imagine parents that have been wanting to have a child for many years. They've been married for 20 years, and she's in her early 40s, and her mother finally falls pregnant, and she gives birth to this child, and she's holding this child in her arms, this baby in her arms. The love and the compassion that she must feel for this being is like, you and I couldn't put words to that. Be like, oh wow, that's super loving. No, it's a level we it's hard to put into words. The Baal Shem Tov says God's love for you is that times infinity. Now, if I were just to tell you that God loves you, or God's, you'd be like, okay, well, that's nice, like cool. If you're able to close your eyes and you're able to calm down, you're able to sit into imagining what it's like going through that mother's life, and then imagining, deducing from your own emotions a little bit about what she's feeling, and then you move that up into the way God cradles you, the way God breathes a breath into your mouth at every moment to give life to you, the way God's compassion for you is on another level that we cannot fathom. I believe that can birth from mind to heart. That can bridge, dot, can connect your mind and your heart, and make you feel that love back towards God. So I use it in meditation a lot. I would say these ideas of going beyond the intellect for sure. And I believe it's very important, just like you do.
very cool. When your main one of the main things I would say is, and how you have like on your website and social media, is experiential Judaism for this generation. How did you feel that Judaism, maybe it was taught growing up, or even myself growing up, never looked at it in that way? It was, at least in how it is uh, presented, because it's, as we both also learn more and more, it's not actually how it really was meant to be, but how it perhaps was presented through different outlets maybe didn't make it seem so experiential. Maybe it seemed too rigid. Uh, what led you to start this experiential Judaism? And what do you really mean by it? Obviously, by experiencing it and creating that da'as, that connection. Uh, but really, I'd love to hear a little bit more of all about it.
Yeah, thank you. The segue from what we just talked about is perfect for that question, because For children, it's different. I think, you're not yet so mature and you're not thinking about spiritual things, I think at least till you're 16, 17, 18, like getting your mind starting to expand. Um, I think that when I talk about experiential Judaism, I'm talking about what we just said, the ability to incorporate um, mindfulness and meditation into everything that we do in the rituals and into the services, which is funny to say, right? What do you mean in the services? Isn't prayer inherently that way?
Mm.
Not necessarily. I mean, if you go into a shul, into a synagogue, and you're rushing through the prayers, or there's um, you're sitting on a hard chair with a white wall and you don't know the language and you're coming in for Yom Kippur for the first time in your year, you're probably not going to feel much. So how do we create experiences for people to go beyond just the mind or just beyond the words that they're saying, but really like feel into the moment and
Yeah.
feel into the purpose of why that ritual is there in the first place? And I started thinking back to the way Judaism always was. I mean, if you were to walk into the temple in Jerusalem, you would have had music being played by the Levites, like you said. They were actually trained to play music in a way that would arouse the heart and inspire the person bringing the sacrifice. So the whole purpose was to make it an experience, not just a to-do list or bring this. And, you had incense smoke and you had fire and you had walking barefoot overlooking Jerusalem. And it was like, it was a powerful experience. And I think we've lost a lot of that in how we approach our services and how we approach our everything that we do. So I always try to make events and make it experiential for people that they can um, connect to it and then bring it into their lives moving forward. Because, like we said earlier, we want it to be something that can impact your life moving forward. So every time I make an event or I share something, I'm always mindful of how can I make this go beyond just a something that someone's listening to or learning about, but bring it into their life's experience, and they can have that dot and that connection to it.
Yeah, you hit it on the head when you said the approach, or at least you hit it on the head when, for me, when you said like the approach to it, because I feel like it, and this will lead into the next question. I feel like there's also a fine line between all the doing, the check mark, all that kind of stuff, and not like the observance and not getting absorbed by it. So it's how do you create that fine line where you're doing those things but not what's the word,
Like getting lost in the
yeah,
details.
or like confined by them,
Mm.
because there's also, as you also have learned, I'm sure with meditation, you learn to not let things external affect you. Not, of course, like that doesn't mean like somebody um, says something rude to you, or like you mentioned earlier, cuts you off. It doesn't mean you don't react, or it's okay to react, but the time it takes from that refractory period from the stimulus to the response, you can either close the gap, so it's somebody cuts you off, and then all right, this happened for a reason, and not just saying that willy-nilly, but actually. And so but at the same time, there is this, like we were talking about, that things have energy, and in Judaism we have all these different rich portals, whether it's saying a blessing, and all that kind of things, or with the kosher food, or this different laws. How do you really create that fine balance?
So I love how you said portals,
Yeah.
because don't get me wrong, when we talk about a mitzvah, something that God asks of us, you could have the most spirituality in the world. You could be on fire for God, levitating off the ground. And we believe it doesn't get you as high as doing a simple mitzvah that God asks. Taking a lulav on Sukkot and shaking it with no feeling. Eating matzah on Pesach night with zero intention. Just doing, because why? Because the levitating spiritually is a finite being going to the peak of their ability. And eating matzah on Pesach is doing an infinite act. It's something that the infinite desires, and therefore you're connecting. Now, what's the ideal is to merge the two.
Yeah.
Because you want to feel it too. You want to, they say that when you say a prayer, it's like the body of a bird. The love and the awe is the right wing and the left wing that brings the bird to fly high. So there is an idea that if you want to reach your mitzvot and your prayers and everything you do in Jewish ritual and mitzvot to ascend as high as possible, you want to feel it. You want to think about it. You want it to resonate with you. So we're not saying to be cold and unfeeling, but like you said, a portal is to look at the rules and think not as rules, but as mitzvot are opportunities of connection. There are portals of connection. There are God giving us a gateway to go high. But if you want to feel it in your own life, you're going to have to make it something that you understand. Like one of the things I like thinking about is the word in Hebrew for reason, like reasoning, is ta'am. And the word for taste in Hebrew is
that's my favorite. Yeah.
If you understand what you're doing, it gives you taste. It gives you as I say in Yiddish, a geschmack. It gives you a pleasure. For example, if you go to a music festival, you're probably going to really get excited when you hear a song of like your favorite band. Like, I know that song. You can sing with them because you know it. In Judaism, if you don't know why you're doing something, it's not going to have the same pleasure as when you understand the reasoning behind it. So it's up to us to take a little bit of time before a holiday, before Shabbat, to like study a bit, and it adds so much meaning to what you're doing, and it brings it to you, because what you're doing is holy anyways, but it brings it then into your life as well, and permeates your mind and your experience.
Well, I love what you said about the mitzvahs. It's interesting to meditate on and contemplate how it might be even beyond the spiritual connection. It takes time, it takes practice to take that intellectual understanding and really kind of also embody it. So how, and sometimes it's unconscious in how somebody may approach this mitzvah, even with that understanding that you're sharing, to, like sometimes I feel like if I get to the place where it's like you want to do it, but at the same time, if you don't do it, it's not, I don't want to say bad, but not like, it's interesting getting to the place where you're not leaving that connection outside of you. Are you with me? It's like saying the blessing on the coffee and the kosher coffee, etc. That is the mitzvah you're saying, but at the same time, if you don't do that, like how do I put this?
What if we reframe? I like to reframe religion as a relationship, right? So think about a relationship, let's say with your wife or your future wife. There's love there. It's great. You're free to creatively show your love in so many ways. You can surprise her. There's so many things, but part of that relationship is going to include obligatory stuff like shoveling the driveway if you live in a cold place, or doing daily things that you might not, it's showing your love, but it's not necessarily always how you want to do it. So I think doing the ritual you're talking about, like let's say I have to make a blessing on something, even when I'd rather just grab it and eat it, I think it gives a humility. It's like, okay, it's not just about me always. And me, today I feel great love for God, so I'm going to meditate for 5 hours and learn Torah. Tomorrow I feel nothing, I'm going to do nothing. It's like, no, you're in a relationship, buddy. You can't just, do whatever you want all the time. You have to show that love and that appreciation daily. Some days you'll really feel it. Other days you won't, but you'll do it anyways because you're in a relationship. And I believe our connection to God isn't just I feel it and then I don't. That was what Mount Sinai was, right? Like it was the Torah was the wedding ring. We put the wedding ring on and it's on. That's it. You can't run away from it. It is what it is. Many of us may try to, but it's also beautiful to look at it as a commitment. And every human relationship is an analogy for a relationship with God. So there's the best friend part, the fun, but there's also a king and a servant of the king, or a father and a child. Like every archetype, like Carl Jung likes to talk about, every archetype exists between us and God too. And one of those archetypes is a servant to a king is like, you know what? I'm committed through thick and thin. And if someone wants to kill me, like's happened in every generation of Jews, it would be much more nice to say, all right, I'm not going to follow this right now. Jewish people said, no, I'm committed. This is more real than just emotion. This is more real than just inspiration. It's truth. And I'm not going to turn from that even when my emotion or my mind isn't feeling it right now. I'm committed to something and I'm going to stay within that.
It's interesting you mentioned Carl Jung. I heard, I think it was Rabbi White Jacobson talk about how there's one of his last interviews, he mentioned his one of his main inspirations was the Maggid.
I love that. It's the
This guy
80th
that lived
birthday.
in Mezrich, Russia.
He said it's amazing that Dov Ber of Mezrich was Mekavan, he already saw my whole kind of vision of my teachings before I did. Yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool.
Yeah. The one thing that stuck out, and I know we'll come to a concluding for this episode, is you said we have these analogies of the relationship, but at the same time, you know, we are a literal piece of God. And even the Baal Shem Tov has a quote that you say, you know, when you grasp a piece of God, there's no or the piece of infinity, you get the whole thing. So it's, how do you merge also that, you know, on the days you are feeling that really great connection, perhaps you meditate multiple hours, but then also flow with it where, you know, the next day you're not feeling as much of a connection, and doesn't mean that you don't go, it doesn't mean you don't do it at all, but you're, all right, I'm doing a little bit less today. Not less, but in tune with also paying a connection with how you are feeling, because that is also very important, and you are a literal piece of God.
So first of all, we have the mitzvot that we do daily that keep you that connection going. Even when you're not feeling it, you go to the bathroom, you make a blessing. You put on tefillin. You have the things that are keeping. Even when you're not feeling it, we have things in Judaism that keep you feeling that connection. But one teaching that helped me a lot is the Baal Shem Tov says, he calls it mochin de gadlus and mochin de katnus, which would mean small or big brain, but the actual idea is expanded consciousness and constricted consciousness. And that helped me because I could identify in my life, not just like moments, but phases of my life that were expanded consciousness, where everything felt connected, where I felt totally on fire, everything flowed, I was inspired, everything is like, everything's fitting this paradigm of like divine providence. And then there are times where maybe I'm not stoking my soul enough and I'm kind of getting bogged down and stuff. And I have constricted consciousness. When I put on tefillin in the morning, I don't feel anything. When I want to pray or meditate, I'm not really feeling excited. I don't have a desire as much. It's simply, we have to do as many things as we can to try to create an environment for expanded consciousness. And there will be times when we just don't have it. And that might last a day, a week, months. But to know that it will come back. We will get back to that point. It's just about the journey. I'm committed to the journey. Life's going to be a journey. I'm going to have ups and downs, like we said, ebbs and flows. But he actually says there that just make sure to keep a point of expanding consciousness even within constricted. Make sure you still have that like wonder, that fire at some level of yourself, even when you're like you're doing your taxes for 3 weeks, you're barely studying anything. Maintain a little bit of that fire, learn something 5 minutes a day of something special, pray with like one moment of fervor, even though it's 40 minutes of prayer, like choose one moment to really like feel it and connect.
Nice.
So like, yeah, you know, so there's going to be ebbs and flows for everybody. Baal Tshuvas are famous meaning those that come back to the religion later in their life are famous for being on fire, having expanded consciousness. And then like anything else in life, and hopefully we'll have this lecture during the retreat, there's going to be that dip. Some people treat the dip as, okay, I'm out. Like, I'm not excited anymore. And we do this in relationships too. Oh, I'm not on fire for this girl or guy anymore. Others say, you know what? That spark that I had, that I felt is true. And if I stick to it, I will be able to internalize that in my life in a more grounded way. It might not be as fiery, but I'll have moments of fire along the way. And and to settle in that constricted consciousness, knowing that the expanded is true and you'll get back there at some point.
Yeah, awesome. Well said. And one analogy that helps understand that learning curve for me is like when you teach a dog to get on a couch, he doesn't get on the couch, he doesn't get on the couch, he doesn't get on the couch. Then when you think that he got it, he gets on the couch. And that's like that point where you can either react at it and he'll just continue with that habit, or you understand that that's part of the learning curve, as you're saying with the meditation. And it's really, as I've also learned with meditation, just falling in love with that effort process, because just getting up and doing it and praying, it allows for those insights, those aha moments to come when you least expect them, which also allows for that wonder, that curiosity.
It's a win. It's a win just by doing it every day, even if you feel nothing. You've done something there. Yeah.
Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time to come and speak with me. Where can everybody follow you and watch what you're doing, whether it's on YouTube or your podcast? And you have the Divine You virtual retreat coming up that I just signed up for. Please share.
Thank you, Solomon, for having me on. I'm really inspired by the work you do, the hustle you show to bring light to the world, and blending all the aspects of modern world and the spiritual world. I am at Millennial Rabbi on all social media platforms, or millennialrabbi.com. And we have the Divine You retreat on May 23rd with a bunch of great wellness experts and top rabbis in the world and rebbitzins in the world. It's pretty unique. I'm really excited you're joining us, and anybody else who can would love to have you. And message me anytime on Instagram or anywhere else, and love to be in touch with anybody.
Awesome.